So, did any of you ever have a vision or see a miracle? Don't have to answer. So, I think I had at least two. I don't know, maybe more, maybe not, maybe they're not. But anyway, one occurred the summer that I was 5, and it was nighttime, and I was really sleepy. And because there was no air conditioning back in the day, we would sit out on the front steps sometimes till 10 or 11 o'clock at night until the heat of the day wore off. So I was snuggled in my father's lap, and I was looking across the street, and suddenly I saw this car drive off without its owner. It just took off all by itself. The second one took place when I was in my 40s. And I used to work in a drug-infested area in Philadelphia that was unfortunately called the Badlands. And one day, I took a wrong turn on my way home, and I stopped at a light in front of a shuttered Catholic church. And for those of you old Philly people, St. Bonaventure's, anybody know where that is? So a white lady in a fairly decent car driving in that neighborhood usually meant only one thing to the residents. I was there to buy drugs. So as a young man approached my car, indicating to me that I should roll down my window, I wasn't afraid. Maybe I should have been. But anyway, all of a sudden there was this wind, and all the trash in front of the church swirled into a mini tornado right in front of the barred church doors. And then the young man disappeared, and I drove away and obviously got home very safely. So the picture in my vision, any number of folks on the street probably saw the same thing that I saw. It was probably very commonplace because unfortunately there was a lot of trash. But I interpreted that trash tornado in front of the church doors as a message from God. Vulnerable communities are not supposed to be abandoned, and economics should not be a determinant of religion. So I'm not a judge or arbiter of visions or miracles, but I suspect that both like last week and this week's gospel, we really don't know what the companions of Jesus actually saw. If you remember, last week was the Gospel of the Transfiguration. Sunlight, moonlight, heat, hunger, fatigue, religious fervor, and retroactively filling in a past to explain what the evangelist had come to believe in the latter part of the 1st century, all work to paint an epic picture of faith and not fact. As a result, we only know what folks who lived 50 years later thought about people that they had never met or talked to. So those of you who were present last week might remember that both Peg and Polly brought up the uncomfortable subject of miraculous visions. So I think that today our first reading and our gospel might be instructive as we try to understand the unfathomable. So the miracles and visions that are recorded in both Scripture and the annals of the saints have been cited as proof that our faith is the one true faith. And as we read these Gospels year after year at Mass, we are subconsciously guided to look for spectacular signs that indicate the presence and the intentions of the divine. Things like earthquakes, fires, the vanquishing of enemies, the feeding of multitudes, virgin births, human beings walking on water or shining like the sun, unexplained healings. And Elijah really thought that he was going to see God in one of those things, as you remember from the reading. But he didn't, did he? To his surprise, the divine presence did not appear in a miracle or a vision or in the sound and fury of natural phenomena. Instead, God was a breath, a mere whisper, as my seminary professor said. And believe it or not, that inaudible breath is the sound that one makes when uttering the ancient Hebrew name for God, Yahweh. Elijah was so moved by this breath of God that he had to hide his face in his cloak. So for Elijah and many others, we might find that, and maybe this is true not true for other people, but people might find that the best place to find God is probably not in a church where a choir belts out to Jesus Christ, our sovereign King. But rather, God is to be found in the merest of whispers, in the beating of a hummingbird's wings as it gets nectar out of a flower, in the sun that rises and falls below the horizon every day without making a sound, in a tiny sunflower seed that grows into a 9-foot beanstalk, in 2 microscopic eggs that meet and grow into a brand new human being. So many of you sitting here might have had an experience like Elijah. Last week, Carol described being completely overwhelmed as she remembered her ancestors while the Litany of the Saints was played during her ordination. My little trash tornado is much more mundane. But poets and mystics regularly write and talk about these types of experiences because they are so powerful. And if you take time to look for them, you will find them everywhere. They are both completely miraculous and completely mundane. Our gospel seems to warn us that if we don't believe in those big and fancy miracles that occur outside the realm of nature, that we have little faith. According to the evangelist Matthew, who says to the shaky Peter, who feels the dark and swirling waters beneath his feet and falls into the drink, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Why? Who wouldn't? Who doesn't doubt? So, putting it in context, people in Palestine at the time of Matthew in the late 1st century chose not to believe in that Jesus was the fulfillment of the law because they were Jewish and they found their salvation in the law. And so early followers of Jesus used these stories of miracles to prove that they, and not their fellow Jews, were the chosen people. But there is another side to this story. And if you recall, there was another side to the story last week. Don't get ahead of yourself with last week. This week's, the clerical sexual abuse scandal demonstrates what happens when we believe that mere human beings like Peter, who appear to be chosen by God, can walk on water. Despite a massive betrayal by the church that has not been resolved, too often people in the past chose to absolve the chosen from their sins. But we know that doubt is, in fact, a protective mechanism, and we should pay attention when we have those feelings of doubt. They are worth listening to. But alas, the worthy nature of doubt sometimes gets lost in our supposed faithlessness to God. We might even beat ourselves up because we don't believe like we think we should believe. Like Peter, our faith is sorely tested by the dark and swirling waters of doubt. And we are sometimes bitterly disappointed by our fellow human beings. And we are terribly hurt by the things that happen to us and others, by things that are completely beyond anyone's control. And so our wounds are often deep and very painful. And during times like this, we look for comfort, not criticism, not condemnation, and not judgment. So I have to confess that I never really listened to Sinead O'Conner, when she was famous, and I've only really come to appreciate her and read about her since her untimely passing. But I think her poem today about Mother God in today's second reading, coupled with Elijah's whispering, breathing God, for me at least, surpasses any theological tome, any dogma, doctrine, and the shock and awe of any miracle or vision. Because when I read this poem, I know without a shadow of a doubt that not only has God saved me, God has saved everyone else. And so, my sisters and brothers, you should know without a shadow of a doubt that the good news is that God is a whisperer of love and comfort and not judgment. God is the lap that holds you when you are sad and despairing and tired. God is the arms that shelter you as you walk through the storms. God is the one who helps you hold your head held high as you slog through the valley of tears here on earth. This poem, written in the depths of her mental illness and despair over the suicide of her son, in spite of that, O'Conner could still believe that God had always been with her. Her poem reassures us that even when we cannot see God, even when we cannot hear her or feel her, those divine arms have always been wrapped around us. She wipes away all of our mistakes, the mistakes that we might have made on purpose, the mistakes that we might have made in our despair. She wipes them all away without condemnation. She will comfort us in the dark night and does not need power and glory to prove her existence. She is the breath of the universe, the source of life and love, and she is always pressed down and overflowing into our laps. And so I think, and you might have a different opinion, but I think we believe otherwise at our peril, because judgment, atonement, punishment, and retribution have not made the world a better place. As another poet, Adrienne Rich, wrote, "Without tenderness, we are all in hell."